This is Indian Country Today.
Thank you for joining us. I'm Mark Trahant. Here are the headlines from Indian Country Today. The past year was one like no other. Yet the President of the National Congress of American Indians says the state of Indian nations remains standing strong. The annual speech is usually given from Washington, surrounded by tribal leaders and members of Congress and the administration. But this year, President Fawn Sharp talked by Zoom from her office in Washington State. She says the virus has taken a large toll on Indian country.
Tribal elders, leaders, language speakers, fathers, mothers, grandparents, siblings, and children, taken by a virus that has disproportionately impacted Indian country, laying bare the ultimate price of the federal government's long-standing neglect of its trust and treaty obligations to tribal nations.
Yet, Sharp remains optimistic. Tribes, indigenous organizations, and other supporters of Deb Haaland are making it clear to the nation they support her confirmation as the first Native American to hold a cabinet office. Haaland's image was projected on the front of the U.S. Department of Interior along with the hashtag #DebForInterior. Every social media tool is being used. A tweet storm, billboards in western states, and op-eds placed across the country. Haaland's confirmation hearings began today. She told the Senate that oil and gas will continue to play a major role in America's energy sources, even as the Biden administration makes climate change a priority. She said she is committed to strike the right balance as the agency manages energy development and seeks to restore and protect the nation's sprawling federal lands. Haaland pledged to lead the Interior Department with honor and integrity and said she will be a fierce advocate for our public lands. One southern Arizona tribe is setting a new record for providing housing. Indian Country Today's Karina Dominguez has the story from Tucson.
The Pasquayaqui tribe received the largest tax credit ever awarded to a single tribal development. The $1.8 million low-income housing tax credit award will be used to build 50 new homes. They will be rental units for the first 15 years, and during that time, the tribe will provide financial education to families to prepare them for homeownership. At the end of the 15 years, the homes will be made available for purchase at sub-market amounts. Tribal member Rachel Irigoyen says she's grateful for housing opportunities, but they take a long time.
I applied back in February of 2006 when I had found out that I was pregnant with my son, and he turned 14 by the time we moved into the house.
The tribe currently has 569 rental units, and there are 1,007 people waiting for a rental property. Irigoyen moved into the last low-income housing units the tribe completed.
It was just a relief, a huge relief. It was almost a year that I was without housing on my own. Previous to that, I was living in town renting, and so to come here and have a brand new place that nobody else has lived in, first time in it, and it was just a relief and a blessing.
Don Cardenas is the CEO of the Pasquayaqui Development Corporation and oversees the project. She says it's a part of the tribe's long-term economic development goals.
It's also going to develop our area to where we can maybe, sustain more housing, have more developments.
One of the tribe's biggest challenges is meeting the housing needs of its citizens.
Unfortunately, in this specific area, we have 3 times the unemployment rate than the surrounding community. So as soon as you get off the reservation, you have a better chance of getting a job than if you live on the reservation.
She says the upcoming project will also create job opportunities for tribal members through Sonoran Pueblo Contracting, or SPC. It's a subsidiary of the tribe's development corporation. SPC recently finished 6 5-plex buildings on the tribe that were also built with low-income housing tax credits.
I don't think that we can ever catch up to the number of people that need housing for our tribe. There's always that need, so we have to really think out of the box.
This project will be the tribe's 7th low-income housing tax award, and it will include modern aesthetics and green features to make the homes energy efficient. In Tucson, Arizona, Karina Dominguez, Indian Country Today.
And those are the headlines from Indian Country Today. I'm Mark Trahant. When we come back, chances are you've watched one of the thousands of documentaries produced by Vision Maker Media through the years. We'll talk with the founder on its 45th anniversary. Nearly a half a century ago, there were very few news stories and documentaries about Native Americans or Alaska Natives, and certainly fewer that were produced by Native people. That started to change in 1976 when the Native American Public Broadcasting Consortium was founded. It started as a membership service for public television stations to broadcast Native American content and a film archive to conserve and document Native American stories. 45 years and 3 name changes later, Vision Maker Media is a giant in public television. One thing that hasn't changed, and that's its home base, Lincoln, Nebraska. Frank Blythe joins us today from the place where he founded Native American Public Broadcasting Consortium. He retired in 2006. Welcome, Frank.
Good afternoon or good morning. Good, nice to be here. Thanks.
And his daughter, Francine Blythe-Lewis, also joins us. Today, she is executive director of the organization that's now called Vision Maker Media. Welcome, Francine.
Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Frank, let's start with you. Everyone wants to know about the humble beginnings of any major organization. How humble were the beginnings of Vision Maker Media?
Well, they were pretty humble. We started with one office in the basement of NET Television in Lincoln, Nebraska in 1978, 76. Got our first grant from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and we've been fortunate to have those grants come to us for 45 years and have kept that up. But it took a lot of work to keep them in the groove with us, and we just grew from there. We started out basically as a station membership organization. Public television stations were the impetus behind our initial organization. They got us together. At the time, there were about 6 Native Americans working in public television or public media. And they found us all, got us together at a meeting in Wingspread, Wisconsin, at the Wingspread Foundation, and set us in a room and said, you guys come out with a plan. Of course, we didn't know what the heck we were doing, but we had some good people there that got together and put our heads together, and we spent all afternoon hammering out at least the beginnings of a plan to involve the stations supporting us as well as other entities, and we got it out. We first called it Native American Public Broadcasting Consortium, which was a membership organization. The stations joined us as members to use our library, and we did that for about 20 years. But anyway, it grew from there, and it got us started at Nebraska ETV Network in Lincoln, Nebraska.
Well, and you probably don't get credit for a lot of this because it's not in the official history, but some of the major media stories really started with your organization. I'm thinking of the American Indian Media Festival and how it really became what later became the Native American Journalists Association.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's right. We joined with the American Indian Film Festival at the time in I think it was 81, 82, or 78, somewhere in there. Anyway, and we started sponsoring what we call the National Indian Media Conferences. And those went on for about 4 or 5 years, but it was the impetus for getting other organizations off the ground, primarily the Native American Journalists Association. So we're glad we had a hand in that.
So much history from that period of time. What are some of the memories you have of events that shaped Vision Maker Media?
Oh, well, we've once we got out of the conferencing business, which was really a time-consuming effort for us, and we didn't have a lot of funds to support all that, but we started concentrating on Native American productions for film and media, and primarily for public television. That was our main mission, was to bring Native films Native programming to public television, which was in its infancy at the time too, because it only got started in 1969, and PBS started in 1972, I believe, and we came on board in 76. So we were all new together, and at the time, PBS wanted to be something for everybody. So they were pretty inclusive, including Native American programming, Asian American programming, Mexican American programming, or Latino programming as it's called now. So we got all our starts with the impetus of PBS behind us and the Corporation for Public Broadcasting behind us. So that's how we got off the ground.
Francine, you basically grew up in this enterprise. What are your memories of the organization and its growth?
My father's always been a role model. He always took me to all kinds of conferences. He had me meet media professionals, Native Americans in all kinds of fields. And also whenever his board came together, he always allowed me to come and join when they did their evening board dinner meetings. And so I got to meet a lot of people, some of them that are still in the business and some that are my age and colleagues that we work with in different areas of media throughout the country. So that was really the biggest influence in me, was just meeting these Native professionals from around the country on his board and then talking about what they were doing in film and media.
Francine, your father mentioned the promise of public television and being representative. How far do we have to go to make that happen?
Well, actually, CPB just awarded, there's 5, they're called consortiums at the time, now they're alliances, and the cultural alliances that he had mentioned with Latino, African American, Asian American, Pacific Islanders, and us, American Indians. And the CPB just awarded all of us an additional $500,000 beginning this fiscal year annually. And so for all of us, it just means us being able to streamline more production straight into broadcast and bringing more diversity and many more different platforms within PBS. And that's all of what we plan to do. And that's what certainly, we just had our public media fund close, and we had more than 80 applicants. And so we are looking forward to a good, promising number of new stories from Native filmmakers going out to broadcast.
And I should mention for transparency that Vision Maker Media was one of the first funders of Indian Country Today's broadcast.
That's right, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So Vision Maker Media is kicking off a year-long celebration with free community events and online screenings and virtual programs. What's next on this agenda?
Well, in addition to what we're doing, we put because of COVID, we put our film festival that was in person in Lincoln, Nebraska every other year. We put it online last year, and it kind of blew the visibility of Native story and Vision Maker Media out of the water worldwide. We received more than 164,000 streams to watch our film festival. We had subscriptions increase up to 15,000 more. And feedback was just people really had no idea that Native Americans were so abundant, successful, and struggling, but yet also thriving within our cultures and our communities on all kinds of social topics. And so this year we're continuing with online programming around Women's History Month, around environment, around Indigenous Day, of course, Native American Heritage Month. We are going to expand and broaden our producer training to allow more people, if they were not funded by us, to also participate in the training, which we will also do online because of COVID. And then also we are beginning to invest more money in youth media and then short fictional platforms for PBS, who is right now working and discovering and experimenting with more digital narrative platforms, and then also continue with our public media long and short form documentary for broadcasting.
That's a far cry from where we started from, Mark. We started just making films. Film was the medium at the time. Then it went to videotape and stayed with videotape up until the mid-90s. And then it started turning into the digital media aspect of it, which is about the time I retired, and it kind of left me behind after that. But those are the fun days, though, working with filmmakers and talking to them about all their films and how they're doing it and how they're working it. The biggest challenge for them was always raising money to do their films. We awarded small startup grants to get them started, research, production, and finishing grants. But they had to raise the rest of the money for whatever their budget was. But those are the fun days, though, because you work more closely with them now than you do online with the producers. So it was more one-on-one, and got to meet a lot of great producers and filmmakers in that period of time over those 40 years.
Let me ask both of you this, I guess, Francine, going forward, Frank, looking back, is what productions do you look at and smile when you see them air and say, wow, that was something that I got going?
Well, one of the big ones we had was In the White Man's Image on PBS, the story of boarding schools. We also did a couple of productions ourselves called Native Americans of the 21st Century. And we worked with the Australian network in Australia, and everybody produced a documentary on their country and shared it with each other, and we circulated those all around. So those are some of the aspects of it. The other thing that we were pretty proud of was we started the American Indian Radio on Satellite Network, and got it off the ground, got it running, and then we also started producing the first national Native American radio talk show, Native America Calling, which is still on the air today.
That's right. We have about less than a minute left, Francine. What excites you about projects that are in development?
Well, going forward is taking all the great stories, like what my father said. We still have abundance of great stories out there in Indian country. And so getting them into more platforms. We were having conversations with NOVA, PBS 13. We've already collaborated with PBS World Channel on programming and content, American Reframed. We've got films going out in broadcast. So just getting all of these great stories into more diverse platforms within PBS. And also, we're not doing radio, but we're looking into creating a podcast. So extending what was already begun in the beginning and moving it into the technological digital age of today.
Thank you for joining us today, Frank Blythe.
Well, thanks for inviting me. It's been a real joy to spend 45 years of my life working with the Native media groups that we ran across all these years, the filmmakers, the producers, and all the people involved in Native American production, and working with tribes. We got to meet a lot of tribes around the country that are now exploring their possibilities in media themselves and trying to do some things too. But it was a great experience for me, and I enjoyed the time that I spent working with all of them and all of the people in Indian country.
And thank you, Francine Blythe-Lewis.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
When we come back, recovery from the devastating winter storm will take people in Texas weeks, if not years, to recover. We'll check in with a reporter who's been covering the storms. Last week, the country watched in shock as the state of Texas fell to a huge winter storm and its power grid couldn't handle the demand for heat. Millions of people were left without power, which led to water pipes bursting and just about no one being able to drive anywhere safely. Throughout this winter storm that dragged on for days, reporters were busy reporting on the dire situation. Pauly Denetclaw is a reporter with the Texas Observer. She joins us now to tell us about some of the stories from this storm. Welcome, Pauly.
Hi, Mark. Thank you for having me.
So this is really an extraordinary experience because you took a new job and because of the pandemic, you couldn't move and you're having to do reporting in a really complicated way.
Yes. So the reporting that I did about the storm And I feel like our newsroom was very lucky in that two other reporters besides myself live outside of Texas. And so we were really able to cover this story as folks in my newsroom, other reporters, editors, were really dealing with the issues that were occurring with the power grid. I had coworkers who didn't have power for 40 plus hours. They were walking to get groceries or the things that they needed. The roads were just impassable. And so it was really amazing to be able to step in and help my newsroom with this reporting, and be able to do 9 short stories about how folks across Texas have been impacted by the storm.
How did the story unfold? I mean, you first heard about the storm, and then kind of what was the steps that happened after that?
So really how this came about is actually back in 2019, one of our reporters, Amal Ahmed, wrote about the power grid in Texas, about how it was vulnerable to these types of situations. In her story, she focused on the heat wave that was coming in, and how that could really stress the system and cause power outages. And we saw that happen this year because of the winter storm and the increased power usage that was happening. And the system just, completely failed, and people were without power for days on end. People didn't have access to water. And also, some people have electric stoves and so couldn't even make food. And so, yeah, that's really, it started, we were aware that this was a possibility in 2019, and then we just saw it unfold this past last week.
2 factors that probably folks ought to know about is that Texas opted to have an independent power grid, so they don't share power with other states like most of us do. And also there's a really deregulatory fervor in Texas that contributes to this. Both of those are reported extensively by Texas Observer.
Yes, definitely. It's really the issues around the power grid and deregulation. We've been really on this story and really creating complete coverage of this. And so I'm really happy that we were able to do that. And with my vignette in particular, people were just not aware that this was a possibility that could happen, that they would have power outages for this extended period of time, where they would be cold in their homes as the temperature dropped. In my story, the person that I wrote about, Janet Brewer, the temperature where she lived was -1 at one point. And her home is completely electrical. And so she wasn't able to do anything. She was cooking on a little butane stove that one of her neighbors brought to her. So it's just awful.
And I should mention she's Cherokee and actually lives on the border with Oklahoma and Texas. How did she survive all of this?
So the way that Jenna is just an incredibly resilient person. She's very independent, and she made that abundantly clear during our interview. And she was just like, I just knew I had to do everything that I could to survive this. And I just thought that was so incredible. And really, she just started insulating her windows. She stayed in her bedroom. And she had actually, luckily enough, over the summer had bought a lot of candles. And it was just by chance that summer she just bought a lot of candles. And those kept her going up until, I think it was last Wednesday. And then she didn't have any more candles anymore. And so she was doing DIY, oil candles that she was using olive oil and tuna cans and string to really, survive this. And she already had a lot of food, so that wasn't an issue. However, she wasn't able to cook on a stove because, again, she had an electric stove. But luckily enough, she lives in a tight-knit community. And so her neighbors were checking on her, and they brought her a butane tank or a butane camping stove. And so she was able to cook food on that. And then really she was just, going around from candle to candle to candle. That was all over her home, trying to keep her pipes from bursting. So one of the pipes in her guest bathroom had just completely frozen. And she was so worried about that pipe bursting in her home that she put a tiny little tea light underneath the pipes. And she just watched that candle all day. And finally, after burning candles underneath there for so long, it finally unthawed. And so she was able to do that. But then in her laundry room, the pipes in there were frozen. And she just was like, let's just hope we get heat.
Amazing story of resilience. Thank you, Pauly Denetclaw, for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.
And that's our slice of the Indigenous world today. Thank you for watching. We'll be back with another edition tomorrow. I'm Mark Trahan.
Indian Country Today is recorded at the Phoenix Indian School Visitor Center in Phoenix, Arizona.
This is Indian Country Today.